Good day, everybody, and welcome to the LTADchat, where we share conversations about developing and implementing best practices in youth and adolescent athletic development. And today we are joined by Pratik Patel, and we're going to discuss appropriate weight gain in young athletes with a specific focus on the teenage American football player. But I think that there's definitely going to be some crossover with other sports and athletic populations here. Including some general sports nutrition information and performance guidance for all youth and teenage athletes. I've known Pratik since about 2012 when Pratik served as the sports dietitian for Michigan State University Athletics, and he was part of our original Spartan Performance Group. Before that, Pratik had completed his undergraduate and his master's education at Kansas State. And he's also served as an intern for the Houston Texans, Kansas City Chiefs, and Kansas City Royals. He joins us from Kansas City right now as well. And after leaving Michigan State, Pratik then went on to be the director of sports nutrition at the University of Oregon, working primarily with football. And then he took a position which he recently resigned from with the NFL New York Football Giants. Pratik, really happy to have you on the show today and talking about this really important topic at a very timely point of the season for a lot of football coaches and players as well.
No, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Yeah. So again, this is a topic, sports nutrition, that we really haven't explored here on LTADchat. Despite its importance with growth and maturation, performance, recovery, and really overall general health and well-being of young people. Again, we're really going to take a deep dive into this very specific topic of appropriate weight gain in American high school football players. And again, this really surfaces at this time of year, which is early December, as a lot of high school football teams are entering the postseason, some of them coming off state championships within the last few weeks. And Pratik, both of us have been around a lot of high school football coaches and football in general. And we know that at this point in time of the year, they're evaluating their past season. And one thing that we know is being said in these coach evaluation meetings or player evaluation meetings by the coaches is that Johnny really needs to bulk up if he wants to play left guard for us next season, or something to that general effect, right? Where we need to get bigger. And yes, of course, stronger as well if we want to be more competitive on the football field next season. Which again, then that vaults us into this off-season training program that's going to be undertaken by many high school football programs across the US. So again, I've always had a concern about what sort of things are being instructed by these coaches who oftentimes are ill-educated in sports nutrition. And so again, want to have you on the show today to really talk about this topic of appropriate weight gain and general sports nutrition for the teenage athlete. So let's just start with the basics. And what should coaches, parents, and high school athletes know about sports nutrition just in general?
I think the main thing is just understanding that the needs for athletes are going to be completely different than what you hear about or see about in the media. So what you want to do is throw all that out the window and recognize that these high school athletes are very active. So you want to make sure you're meeting the energy demand. So eating enough calories to support the training that they're going through, the lifting, that's going to help support them in getting bigger, faster, and stronger. Understanding that these athletes are going to need 4,000, 5,000, maybe even 6,000 calories a day consistently to be able to put on weight based on their size, what their goals are. So to be able to do that can be sometimes difficult. I remember, in high school, I played football. I was skinny. I wanted to gain weight. I had no clue how to do it. So reading magazines, just randomly eating things, not having any specific guidance or any consistency of knowing what to do. Like we were all just, shooting darts at a dartboard blindfolded and trying to see what sticks. So I think the main thing is understanding, like, what does the schedule look like? What are these athletes going through in terms of training? When are they training? What are their opportunities to eat? And how do you support the different things that they're doing for training? So if there's a lift during a day, are the athletes eating before and after to support those adaptations with making sure that they're recovering if they're doing some kind of on the field work or conditioning, are the athletes eating before and after to support the adaptations for that too? But also making sure that they're doing things consistently, like waking up, eating breakfast, eating every 3 to 4 hours, understanding where their meals are coming from. Because as we get into the next semester starting in January, are these kids going to be at home, or are they actually going to be at school? I know how difficult it was to eat at school too, because you eat breakfast at home, you only get a lunch, and then you're training in the afternoon, after school is over. So understanding when are these athletes getting their calories in, what are they doing right and what are they doing wrong? A lot of kids are just rolling out of bed and going straight to school. And maybe they have an early morning training session and that's what they're used to. So knowing that, Johnny X, Y, and Z needs 5,000 calories a day, but he's only getting, about half of that. It's difficult to expect him to just jump and start at that 5,000 level if he's not even doing the basics on the front end, hydrating consistently throughout the day, eating the appropriate amount at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, putting in snacks to fill those large gaps, whether they're 5 or 6 hours between meals, to make sure they have a consistent amount of calories coming in. Because again, it is a calories game, not supplements, not anything like that. They have to eat enough. And, as a high school athlete, I wasn't doing that. And that's why I was all of 140 pounds when I wanted to be 185. Like I just wasn't consistent enough with eating. I learned a little bit more at the tail end of my senior year. I started bringing food to school with me. So that's what I would eat between breakfast and lunch, because lunch was at 11 o'clock. Breakfast was like 6:45. So I needed something in the middle of the day, whether it was bagels, PB&J sandwiches, trail mix, bring a protein shake with me, things of that nature. So when we look at sports nutrition in general, it's eating the adequate amount of calories at the right time. So proper calories, nutrient timing, which goes with pre and post training, the composition of those meals. Are they eating enough carbohydrates? Are they getting enough protein in? Are they eating healthy fats? Are they eating something before bed, because you can still build muscle and support recovery, having a small high protein snack or calorie amount before bed too? Are they hydrating enough? Because these kids are active, they're going to be sweating with any type of activity that they're doing. If they're not drinking much fluid throughout the day, the largest gains and losses that you can see day to day with the variation in their body weight could just be like, hey, this kid's still dehydrated. He's lost 2 pounds. He only gained 1 back, and then he lost 3 pounds, and then he only gained 1 back. So it could be a sliding scale either way.
Yeah. So if I summarize one thing that you said there, and it was kind of one of our mantras when we were at Spartan Performance, is that we need to eat the right types in the right amounts and at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's dive deep now into this appropriate weight gain for high school athletes, and again, we're kind of focusing on football players since we know at this time of year these conversations are happening. And I want to put you in front of a room of coaches and high school football players right now. How would you go about educating and counseling them on this topic? And I think there's some things that you've already talked about, but if maybe we could go a little bit more specific as well, in terms of, you're in front of the room, or you're going to help set a program up for them. What's this process look like, and what are some of the key tenets?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is it can be very easy, or it could also be very difficult. It's going to vary based on what that player thinks about it and what they're going through. I think sometimes we just don't put ourselves in the shoes of the athlete enough and recognize like how much does this athlete actually care about doing what they need to do to get to that goal, because some of these players could gain 20, 30, 40 pounds over the course of a few years, or some just don't at all. And then their opportunity to play at a high level kind of fizzles out the door. Also, what kind of education have they gotten before? Like how much do they actually know about the basics of eating and when to eat? How consistent are they? And what are their habits like currently? Appropriate weight gain can happen. It could be a half a pound up to 2 pounds per week, but that's if a player is consistent day in and day out. Now, if we assess a certain player and we recognize that, this guy has really erratic eating habits, doesn't eat breakfast, kind of just eats a little bit for lunch, trains, and then just has a monster dinner and thinks that, oh, hey, I had a whole pizza last night. That's good enough for weight gain, isn't it? And it's like, well, no, because you missed a lot of opportunities during the day to support what your body can do and get out of the training that you're doing. So I think the biggest thing is just understanding where each individual athlete that they're trying to target is in terms of how motivated are they to do it, what kind of resources and education do they have access to, because the coach isn't going to be with them 24 hours a day, and really neither is the parent. So some of that has to fall on the shoulders of the athlete, kind of being instructed and understanding like, hey, this is what you need to do day in and day out. Now, most might be really excited to start at the beginning of the year, to start, the first couple of weeks of, hey, I have this eating plan put down. My days are pretty consistent, so I know when I'm going to eat. But at the same time, some of them could just get bored, because it could be a chore to gain weight. It could be a lot more difficult to gain weight than to lose weight, because for some of these kids, they're having to force down and do things that they haven't done before too. So if you have a kid who's only eating 2,000 to 3,000 calories a day, and you're trying to throw them up and have them eat 5,000 to 6,000, that's a huge jump. And this kid hasn't even gotten into the habit of eating breakfast. So I think identifying where they could start first by working on one habit, making it consistent, and being able to integrate that into their day, and then slowly building from there. Because weight gain can happen, but it has to happen with the consistent things that they get done right. So they have to develop really good habits. So if you've identified an athlete that just doesn't eat very much at the beginning of the day, or is skipping 6-7 hours between meals, you can identify, all right, well, breakfast is something they can work on, or this athlete needs to work on integrating snacks in during the day, or this athlete doesn't eat anything after training or drink anything after training. We need to work on recovery nutrition. So I think getting an assessment done, because if you have this weight gain plan and you give it to all your athletes, well, each one is successful and struggling at different things. So you're going to have varying amounts of successes with those athletes. I think that's one of the main things. And then the next is, once your athletes do start seeing some improvements, hey, I've gained a pound from the past week, or I've gained 2 pounds in 2 weeks. What you need to understand is now their metabolism is increasing, since they're increasing their mass. So they're going to have to eat even more on top of that to continue to gain weight, because the biggest determinant of energy expenditure and how much an athlete burns is their size. So if they're putting on size, they're going to need to eat more if they want to continue to gain that weight too. So I think a lot of it is understanding that your athletes are going to be at different stages and have different things that they need to work on, and not everybody's going to be able to follow a plan put together, because each one is successful in certain areas and each one has different things that they need to work on. So they all have different goals.
Yeah, I want to get specific here, just so listeners are really clear. So energy demands has come up several times, right? Like you're putting out numbers of calories or whatever, but again, we know that has to be the right type, right? The right macronutrients, not just, hey, I'm having a whole Little Caesars pizza or whatever it is. So that becomes really important. But the other thing that you keep mentioning is the timing, right? This grazing pattern. So what kind of advice can you give to listeners on helping young athletes, prepare food, take food to school with them or wherever they're going, so that they have a consistent, constant supply of good nutrients throughout the day?
Yeah, I think what we could do is, if we want to talk about just what an ideal day might look like,
Yeah.
you could say it's 3 square meals and 2 to 3 snacks in your space between those meals, especially before and after training. So at home, hopefully breakfast isn't so much of an issue, but you might have kids that are left to their own devices, where parents are both at work. They have to take care of breakfast themselves. If they can prep something the night before, maybe like some overnight oats, whip up a shake or a smoothie, or they can put together some toast and peanut butter and have some yogurt with it. At least it sets the day up for success, because we know a lot of studies show that if you eat breakfast, you have a good amount of calories. It increases performance later on in the afternoon, and most of the athletes are doing some of their training later on in the afternoon once the academic day is over. So breakfast, taking something to be able to eat in between breakfast and lunch, because lunch schedule is going to vary. I remember back in high school, we had 3 different periods, and lo and behold, I would always be in the last lunch period of the day. So by the time lunch came around, I was already starving, probably kind of in an energy deficit for the day, because we did something early in the morning. So being able to take something where they can keep it in their backpack or even their locker. So something that doesn't need to be refrigerated, something that has some kind of shelf life, whether it's some trail mix or you make a PB&J sandwich, something on those lines. Maybe it's beef jerky, nut seeds. Kids love sunflower seeds. Every football player loves sunflower seeds. Things that have high calories, but also that are nutrient dense, but aren't going to fill them up too much. So whether they're like, well, I had the snack, I can't eat lunch because I'm so stuffed. So it should serve a purpose. It shouldn't be like 1,000 to 2,000 calories. That's what you should have as your meals. But the smaller snack should be at least 500 to 750 calories. And then lunch is going to be at school, whether, you get a quality lunch served at school. Hopefully they're not going a la carte and just getting pizza and, chicken fingers and fries, or they bring something from home too. That can be something a little bit more substantial. Or, I remember in high school, we were able to leave, either go home or go to open lunch and then come back. Well, given the situation now, most kids are probably not going to be allowed to do that. But having a plan for lunch as well. Same thing, if you've got training in the afternoon, eating something with some carbohydrates, a little bit of protein before training. So it could be, like a banana and peanut butter, maybe some beef jerky, and wash it down with some water. Train in the afternoon and have something immediately afterwards. Because again, for these kids, it's getting in enough calories throughout the entire day. So when they aren't able to, or when they delay those opportunities, you're just missing out on getting, 500 to 1,000 calories right there. And then dinner at home. And then hopefully that's going to be something. I think most meals for these athletes should be at least 40 to 50 grams of protein, whether it's meat, whether it's whatever. Have, at least some kind of color on their fruits, vegetables, because you're going to get a lot of benefits of, the macronutrients, micronutrients coming from there. And then appropriate amount of carbohydrates. This is probably the biggest kicker for high school athletes, is they're so active. They're still growing and maturing. Their carbohydrate demands for team sport athletes are just through the roof. If we're going to use what the science and research says, it's anywhere from, like, for these kids, 5 to 7 grams per kg. So 5 to 8 grams per kilogram carbohydrate. So, we're not talking about for a 350-pound offensive lineman. I mean, these kids might be like 200 pounds. These kids might be 160 pounds. So, divide by 2.2, multiply by 5, 7. That's really not that much if you spread it out throughout the entire day. But if they miss an opportunity, that's when it's like, shoot, we're already behind the 8 ball here. This kid's still training every single day. Now, instead of being able to gain a half pound to a full pound, now he'd be lucky to just stay weight stable. So the consistency aspect of it is important too. But again, if these kids are only eating once or twice per day, you can't expect them to start eating 6 times a day right out the gate, because their stomach's not used to it. You can train the stomach. A lot of good research on that. They just have to at least attempt to try something to get used to eating breakfast at this time, eating a snack at this time. And then when they're consistent with that, start increasing the density and the number of calories at those time points too.
Sounds like progressive overload in the weight room, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, progressive overload works in a lot of different areas in life. It's not just in the weight room.
Yeah, exactly. This wouldn't be a sports nutrition podcast now if we didn't talk about supplements, would it? So, and especially quick fixes when you're a teenage athlete, right? And you're heavily influenced by the media, social media and whatnot. So let's just have a quick talk about supplements. And specifically, let's also talk about creatine, because you have this paper in the National Strength and Conditioning Association journal, the coach journal from last year. So let's talk about supplements in general, and then specifically creatine.
Yeah, I'd say supplementation for high school athletes, I mean, it's not really needed. I was one of those high school athletes that I wanted to be so big, so fast. I took everything under the sun, and it didn't move the needle on my strength, that, the number on the scale. It was kind of a waste of money, time, effort, a lot of frustration. And really, most of these kids have so much energy. They're growing at such a rapid rate. If they go through an appropriate training program and they're getting the adequate nutrition from food first, like, they won't need to worry about supplementation. So unless there's a deficiency that's been proven by, blood work, or a doctor says, hey, this vitamin D is like 11, and, there's not a lot of sunshine out there, yeah, that warrants some supplementation. Or, they've got low iron or anything like that, maybe a multivitamin can assist with that. If there's a athlete that doesn't eat a lot of fish or seafood, I mean, there's a wealth of evidence on not even just youth athletes, but youth in general, supplementing with omega-3 fish oil, DHA and EPA. But other than that, unless there's a deficiency recognized by a doctor and proven by blood work, there's no need for any of these extra supplements. Fat burners, all these, powders, they're not really going to do anything if athletes aren't eating enough calories to support their energy demands and to facilitate recovery. So food is always going to be where athletes can really make their money on. Food, appropriate hydration, and sleep. I mean, that's it. Now with creatine, the ISSN has published a lot of really good papers on it too, that there is really no detrimental effect, but it's only if you start supplementing as an athlete that's already past the maturity stage. So it's already gone through adolescence, it's probably older than 15, 16 years old. If I was working with a high school athlete, then I knew this kid and their parents and the doctors and the coaches knew how to appropriately supplement it at the right times. They could be on it without any adverse effects. But again, kids think more is better. They're going to take too much. It's going to give them GI issues. It's going to pull water into the stomach. So there could be a risk of dehydration and cramping if you take too much. Now, there's good research looking at supplementing a college football team over the course of training camp and a season, where those that were supplementing with creatine, again, it's a 5-gram dose after training once a day, even on off days, that they had decreased incidence of cramping, heat illness, and soft tissue injuries, decreases in inflammatory markers. And they've looked at it in a lot of other adult populations, endurance athletes. But again, that doesn't automatically mean these young kids should start supplementing with it, especially if they can't even eat consistently enough to get enough calories in to support. So yes, when you supplement with creatine, it stores in the muscle. It also pulls water into the muscle too. So that's where the water weight and weight gain happens initially. And it's variable for a lot of different people. It could be 1 pound, it could be 5 pounds, depending on what your natural levels are, if you eat enough meat or not, because you can get small amounts from, beef, chicken, but that's like a 0.5 gram per day, really, when it gets broken down and assimilated. So I would say supplement only to match any deficiencies that your physician can tell you about that you feel comfortable with, and I'm talking only like vitamin D, multivitamin, and fish oil. Outside of that, creatine can be a possibility if the athlete is kind of in the latter stage of high school, 17, 18 years old, and everybody that's involved in the care of that athlete, whether it's the trainer at school, the coach, parents, and the athlete themselves, understands like, hey, this is how you want to take it. Don't take it, you don't need to jump in and take anything else alongside with it, because then it just opens up this door to where, oh, I'm taking this, but I'm not taking this. I need to take this too. I need to take this too. I need to take this too.
Yeah, Pratik, I want to talk about something that wasn't on our script, but I know it's something that we both pay a good attention to because we both believe in this holistic approach to athlete development or human development, right?
Mm.
And that's sleep. So in this process of, a high school boy who has been told by his football coach, let's stick with that example, hey, you need to gain X amount of weight before next season. What's the role of sleep in this process of appropriate weight gain?
Sleep's massive. I think for all athletes at every level, even the NFL athletes that I was working with most recently, it's one of the biggest things that's overlooked, but it can pay the biggest dividends out of anything. And it's something that you're already doing. It's free. So what happens when you sleep? The body basically repairs itself. Generally, when you get in deep sleep, which happens at the first part of sleep, anywhere from 10 p.m. to about 2 to 3 a.m., that's when growth hormone is pulsing at its largest amount, and that's really what facilitates the body to say, hey, we've had all this damage done during the day, our cells are damaged, I want to repair it and bring it back even stronger. So general adaptation syndrome, the same thing happens to the body with and without exercise. So that appropriate amount of sleep is going to be really important, because that's when the body builds itself back up, especially if you have the right nutrients that maybe you had a yogurt or a shake or a small snack with a high amount of protein before bed. Then you have all these amino acids and building blocks that, when the body says, hey, it's time to build itself back up, growth hormones pulsing, hey, we want to repair all this damaged muscle, but we want to make it stronger in case we go through another training session. So getting adequate amount of sleep is huge. And all the studies show that if you are able to do that, that's going to set the body up for all the repair, all the beneficial effects of what happens during sleep with all the hormones that get secreted, clearing all the waste away from the brain so that you're ready and energized and fresh, and you can attack the day the next day having enough energy to be able to do what you need to do, especially if you have an early morning training session or even an evening training session the following day. Now, what happens when you don't get enough sleep? Cortisol stays elevated, the body is stressed, it goes into more of that fight, not flight, the sympathetic system's activated, and really it starts affecting the body's ability to build itself back up. it starts prioritizing burning carbohydrates instead of fat as a fuel at rest, which is the last thing you want to have happen. So then it's tapping into your energy store. So when you wake up in the morning, you just don't feel very good. It messes with your hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin. So you start eating a lot of the things that you crave, a lot of the things that don't necessarily are going to provide benefit for you. And it messes with your appetite. So athletes that are really trying to put on muscle mass, what they've shown is with 6 hours of sleep or less, those that gain 5 pounds, the majority of that ends up being fat instead of muscle. And the same thing is true for those that are trying to lean out. If you lose 5 pounds, but you're getting 6 hours of sleep or less, most of that's going to come from muscle than fat. So the benefit of getting enough sleep is you're really changing the environment in the body to make sure that it's going to be able to really put on muscle mass, gain that weight that you want, not the sloppy weight, and be able to have this awesome frame to be able to build upon.
Great response, Pratik. Something else came up that's not on the script. And again, it goes to this holistic approach, right? Stress management.
Mm-hmm.
For some of these teenage athletes, they're going through a pretty stressful time of their life, pretty dynamic period of life, socially, emotionally, right? Academically, whatever it might be. And again, I know you're real keen on, this holistic approach and including stress management. And, myself working with high school football teams, we've used yoga, we've used meditation, I've used Jacobson relaxation technique with them, but what kind of advice, some simple tips that you can give to, high school coaches, strength and conditioning coaches that work with high school athletes and even, teen athletes themselves on stress management and how that can impact, appropriate development of good body composition as well.
Yeah, and they've done some studies looking at this where they track the number of stressful events somebody, kind of experiences the day before. They look at what they eat afterwards, and then the effect of what's going on in the body 7 hours after that. And what happens is the body's in such a stress state that it is prioritizing, burning carbs over fat. So during the day when you're not exercising, you want to be burning predominantly fat. That's just how, our RER works. That's just general respiratory exchange ratio. But with these stressful events, heart rate becomes elevated. The body gets more into that sympathetic drive that, hey, it's a fight mode. I'm constantly kind of have anxiety. I'm looking around because I think there's something going on, or I'm preparing for an attack, so to speak. So what happens is, like I said, the body starts to hold on to fat because that's what, for generations, for millions of years, that's what's happened to humans as a survival mechanism. Instead of, hey, I know something, girlfriend broke up with me, or exams are coming up, but my coach is talking to me about just working on my breathing, in through the nose, out through the nose, just nice and slowly, maybe 5 count in, 5 count out, do that 10 different times to be able to control and get that parasympathetic vagal tone working instead of staying in this stress state. So it doesn't have to be you, they have to be, the super monk meditation experts, but recognizing that there are things that they can do throughout the entire day, maybe taking 5 to 10, 15 minutes when they get home to just, be by themselves, maybe listen to some music that they like, work on some breathing, maybe at the end of a training session, just kind of sit in the locker room or sit in the weight room, just hang out with friends, but hey, we're going to, breathe through the nose, out through the nose, whether it's 5 count in, 5 count out, and just work on calming the body down, thinking of positive things, like giving gratitude to things that are going well in their life. I know, 2020 has been really tough for a lot of people, but at the same time, it's an opportunity to say, hey, this might be a really bad opportunity, or what really tough going on throughout the world, but it's bad if we allow it to be bad in our minds. What we can rise above it if we start thinking about the things we're grateful for. So maybe at the end of the day, before an athlete, goes to sleep, they just kind of go over 3-4 things that they're grateful for. Maybe, hey, the sun was out, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for my coaches. I'm grateful for this awesome dinner mom or dad made me, and I'm grateful for Wi-Fi internet, whatever. It doesn't have to be the same things every single day, but the way that they can shift their mind and perspective, instead of thinking like, oh, this test is coming up, I'm so worried about it, or my girlfriend is yelling at me and I think she might break up with me, or I'm not as big as I want to be right now. Sometimes all these things come into play, but if some tips are given to these athletes to be able to say, all right, let's not think of myself as a victim, let's kind of look at the good in all these bad situations, or if I feel like my heart rate's elevating, I'm getting really nervous about this test, let me just kind of stop. Let me just start, breathing a little bit, getting a little bit more relaxed. These things can have huge impacts on their ability to just control their emotions around what's going on. So between stimulus and response is choice. So there's always going to be something that happens that might be looked at as an adverse effect, or something that's tough, or something that's stressful, but every person has the choice to control their actions or their reactions based on what they're experiencing. Those that just let it overwhelm them, they're the ones that stay stressed. They're the ones that, they don't achieve what they want to. Their bodies don't transform the way they want to. But those that take control and say, I know this is tough, but I can get through this. I have a support system. I'm grateful for this. This is how I want to calm myself down. They're the ones that have more control over their mind and their body and their outcomes.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to earlier on in the conversation, because you were talking about assessment. So what information can we give to coaches so that they can implement assessment within the scope of their practice as well, right? So we can talk about referring out to a registered dietitian and whatnot as well, but within the scope of their practice, if you're a football coach or you're the high school strength and conditioning coach, what kind of things should they be thinking about and doing related to assessment of nutritional status, body weight, and body composition on a routine basis?
Yeah. And, a lot of these coaches, a lot of these ADs or whatnot, they might not have access to a registered dietitian. So, when it's appropriate, they can refer out to a sports dietitian who knows how to work with, youth athletes. But it could just be asking like a couple questions, when they enter into the locker room or the weight room, to say, hey, did you eat breakfast today? Did you have lunch or snacks? Are you hydrating? That way it just gives an idea of what are their general habits day to day. And if they're answering all the questions, they're checking off, yeah, I'm doing this, this, and this. All right, well, you're definitely setting yourself up for success. You don't necessarily have to worry about these handful or this subset of athletes. But if you have those that are like, yeah, I didn't have breakfast today, didn't have a snack, I had a little bit for lunch, I don't have a water bottle, and it's like, all right, well, this athlete definitely needs a lot more assistance and education, or try to figure out what the barrier is. Are they fending for themselves at home? Do they not have enough money, or did they just forget to pack their snack, in the morning because they didn't do it the night before? So simple questions just to get an idea of what their habits are. And it could just be like, hey, we've got a bunch printed out, put your name on it, check your boxes, flip it over. The coach or the strength coach or whoever, the trainer at the school, they're going to be the ones to look at it. If it seems like there's some red flags there, maybe they can do some follow-up questions. If they need additional help or more professional help, then, send them to register a sports dietitian that might hopefully be in the area, or maybe even somebody virtually. You don't have to, now where everything's done telehealth virtually, you don't have to worry about, we don't have anybody in our area. Shoot, there's so many that are available online. But in terms of, weights and body comps, weights are pretty easy to do. If, they choose one day a week at the beginning of the day to say, hey, we're just going to get our baseline. It's just to kind of check and see where guys are trending. Maybe it's a Wednesday or a Thursday. Maybe you don't want to do it on a Monday because the weekend may not be indicative of where they actually are with their habits. And maybe not later on in the week on a Friday, because sometimes they're just thinking about the weekend. They may have forgotten any and everything that happened the previous 4 days. So maybe it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And that's not to use it as a punishment. It's more to say, hey, are we trending towards what the goal is that is set between the coach and the player? Because the player has to be involved in it too. And if they don't want to gain weight or they don't want to lose weight, it's going to be hard for them to get into doing the assessments regularly. Now, in terms of body comp, that's different because, again, these kids' bodies are still changing. We don't want to put too much stock in, oh, his body fat percentage isn't where it is. Well, shoot, maybe he hasn't even hit his growth spurt. And maybe next year he can gain 4 inches in height and he just all of a sudden puts on 10 to 15 pounds of mass. And you don't want to get into those conversations about, oh, his body fat percentage isn't where it needs to be. So that's where if you do have somebody that has a background in that, maybe, it's an athletic trainer or a registered dietitian that can do some basic, circumference measurements or skin folds or something like that. Or if you have access to a machine like a Sika or an InBody, I don't imagine many high school coaches or athletes have access to a DEXA. Again, the goal is just to track changes over time, not assess where they're at compared to their peers, because every kid's going to be different in this maturation journey. I know I was completely different than a lot of my other friends playing the same positions, wide receiver, DB. And you don't want to use it as a tool to affect them negatively, because you're treading that fine line between telling a kid what is body fat percentage. Maybe it's just looking at, we're measuring lean muscle mass. So that's all we really care about. In football, the leanest guy or the most muscular guy isn't always the best player. We want to assess where this person is now to see where we can help them improve over time. So if you have 110 pounds of lean body mass, and we want to increase that by 5 or 10 over the course of, the winter to spring, to see if that's possible. We just want to worry about that number, not how much body fat this kid has and what the corresponding body fat percentage is, because then it just starts opening up a can of worms that, I've seen in the past. It could work out really negatively, and generally does, with some of these athletes that don't necessarily understand the numbers, and the coaches who don't know how to communicate what those numbers mean. And they get fixated on body fat percentage instead of, hey, his body fat percentage points maybe went up by 1, but he gained 7 pounds of lean mass, and he's gotten significantly stronger. His confidence is through the roof. He looks like a better player out there. So I think sometimes we just have to be really careful about, outside of just, generally jumping on the scale, about body comp assessments.
Yeah, and let's just be clear about best practice on jumping on that scale as well, right? Similar time of day.
Yeah.
T-shirt, shorts.
T-shirt, shorts. They can take off their tennis shoes, so then you don't have to do any calculations. So all you're really looking at is just the number and change over time, because these guys are going to be up and down throughout the entire week. So the number you get that Wednesday morning may or may not be super accurate, because they're just going to fluctuate quite a bit. But if hey, our standard is, we've got our T-shirt, you've got your compression shorts on, you can step on with socks, whatever, because you don't want, bare feet touching all this stuff. So you don't have to worry about cleaning it too much. And then just getting that number. So the next week, have them do the same thing. So then you don't have to subtract for shoes or other clothes. You just keep that number consistent to track the changes, because shirt weighs the same, shorts weigh the same.
Yeah. Make sure the keys and cell phone are out of the short pockets as well.
Oh man, I remember we used to put the 2.5s and the 5s in our pockets, any and everything.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Hey, as we close out here, let's kind of wrap things up. And I'm going to say that you're the head football coach at a high school, or you're the head strength and conditioning coach, and you're going to walk into the weight room, and you're just going to give a quick 2 to 3 minute quick reminders to everybody, right? Like, you've educated them on appropriate weight gain, sleep, stress management, and everything. Give us a real quick hitter, like, hey guys, remember A, B, and C. What are the quick reminders for appropriate weight gain if you're coming into the room?
So I'd say, remember, it's consistently eating throughout the day. So we want 3 meals, 3 snacks. So the snacks can be around training, and then something before bed. So it's eating throughout the entire day. The second is just hydrating too. Football players, whether you're a lineman, whether you're a receiver, you're going to be sweating quite a bit in the weight room and on the field. Just making sure that you're drinking enough water and fluid, milkshakes, juices throughout the entire day, getting liquid calories at your meals too, to stay hydrated. So then you're not worried about, these huge dips during the day. Why am I not gaining weight? And the third is making sure that you're getting enough sleep, because if you want to support the body's ability to recover and put on muscle mass and get stronger, sleep is kind of one of those things that is going to be one of the biggest linchpins to really propelling you for success. Or it's going to hold you back if you're on your phone until 2 a.m. You're playing, Call of Duty or Fortnite or Rocket League until 2 a.m. because, hey, there's plenty of time to do that in the afternoon. But once bedtime's coming, turn that phone down, put the screens away.
Yeah, good. Just to kind of back up on assessment as well, because you talked about hydration and just putting P charts up, in the stalls in the locker room, and educating them on how they can monitor their hydration. Anything else on that?
Yeah, usually, without getting too in depth with doing USG assessments, if kids want to know if they're hydrating appropriately throughout the entire day, it's, before and after training, do they know how much they sweat out? So some athletes, even high school athletes, can sweat out 6 to 10 pounds during a really intense lifting and conditioning session, are they replenishing that back? So 20 to 24 ounces of fluid for every pound that they've lost, because, and we know 16 ounces is a pound, but some of that fluid that they consume is going to be lost through urine. So the body's not going to be able to hold it all. That's why we scale up to 20 to 24. Also, urine color, unless they've, taken some kind of pre-workout or, B vitamin or multivitamin, which is automatically going to turn their urine pee because they're peeing out the residual that the body doesn't use. If they're pale yellow or lighter consistently throughout the day, that's just a good indicator. Now, if they're looking brown, if it's like Oregon Volt yellow, then hey, we need to maybe step it up a little bit, make sure we're getting in enough electrolytes too, sodium, calcium, magnesium, potassium, to be able to hold on to the fluid. And then thirst. If kids are thirsty throughout the entire day, that just means that their body's signaling to say, hey, our mechanisms are reminding us that we need some fluid coming in. So weight, urine color, and thirst are just good ways of kind of monitoring what hydration is.
Great. Hey, as we wrap up here, what about some leave behind resources for the listeners? Whether that be websites, podcasts, places that they can find good handout infographics, things of that nature.
Yeah, a really good one is My Sports Dietitian. So they work with athletes throughout the entire country. So not only collegiate, professional, but a lot of high schoolers too. So they have a network of sports dietitians in different areas, but they also have programs that, if you're a high school and your booster group's got a decent amount of money, but obviously you can't afford to hire a sports dietitian on for everybody. There are, online apps that have different, 10, 12 different learning modules that the athletes can take pictures and learn and kind of figure out, am I training towards, weight gain, weight loss, whatever it is. There are different packages that can be purchased at different levels. And they also have, webinars consistently. And a lot of it has to do with working with, youth athletes, high school athletes. That's a great resource that I think is really highly underutilized, but could benefit, not only just the football athletes of high school football players, but also, basketball, baseball, soccer, volleyball, all the different sports too.
Yeah. Now, I know that you've done some work with Gatorade before, and they have their Gatorade Performance Partner, where they have a lot of resources along with the Gatorade Sports Science Institute. So those can be resources. And then the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and they have their sport performance division.
Yeah. The sports cardiovascular and wellness division, SCAN.
Yeah. And I believe, like you mentioned, trying to find a local sports RD. And if I recall correctly, on that website, there's a place where you can, click your location or your zip code, and it pulls up local sports RDs, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, SCAN has that, and then the CPESDA, the Collegiate Professional Sports Dietitians Association. Now that might be a little bit higher than the high school level, but they also have a large network of sports dietitians, people that are also in private practice that could potentially work with high school football players and different athletic departments in the surrounding areas.
Yeah. Hey, Teak, on behalf of coaches everywhere and the millions of youth and high school athletes that are going to benefit from this information, I really want to thank you for sharing your expertise on this topic. This was a really great, 45 minutes or so on sports nutrition in general, appropriate weight gain, but then mixed in that holistic approach as well, that we know is so important to overall athlete development. So thanks for that. Listeners can follow you on social media at Pratik X Patel. And why don't you tell us a little bit about some of your upcoming endeavors, like your podcast and other places that people can find you.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, my social media, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn is at Pratik X Patel. And for me, it's just what I want to do is just give back everything that I've learned over the past, decade, 11 years in sports and performance, sharing some of the experiences and things that I've learned, things that have made athletes and organizations successful, and the things that even professional athletes and college, really high level college athletes fail at, that can really be impactful in terms of not only just nutrition, but performance and development. And a lot of it has to do with just the holistic aspect of working with athletes. So we're going to be putting a lot more information out there, and it's not just specific to athletes. It could be for any active population. It's just understanding the principles behind it and tailoring it to each situation. A lot more educational materials. I'm going to start posting on Instagram just about nutrition in general, some sports nutrition tips as well. And the podcast is a slow go. It's called the Man on Fire podcast. It's available on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, and really it's just bringing on a lot of different people from all walks of life. You know, some coaches, VPs, former athletes, current athletes, and them sharing their stories and the things that they've experienced and learned about what it takes to actually succeed in the real world. So no leadership fluff, you know, no one size fits all approach. It's what it comes down to is understanding that everybody that's really achieved something in life has gone through some adversity. It's not just been an automatic handout. And the reason that they've been successful is they've learned to get out of their comfort zone. They appreciate what being uncomfortable does to them because it forces you to act. And if you don't act, then you're not going to achieve what you want to. And recognizing that it takes a lot of hard work to get from, you know, where you want to be to where you are to where you want to be. And that's just not just for coaches, it's for athletes too. You know, a lot of these really high level athletes, even though they're very, very gifted athletically, it doesn't mean that they can just show up on game day and, you know, perform at a Pro Bowl level. Like there's a lot of work that goes into it behind the scenes. And those athletes that, you know, get drafted, that get recruited, that are, you know, first round picks or 5-star athletes that don't recognize that they have to put in the work every single day. They have to get better at their craft. They have to take care of their bodies and their mind. They're the ones that fizzle out. And we see it all the time. And you don't even have to be a first round pick or a 5-star athlete. You know, my first guest was Angus Reid on the podcast. He was an undersized lineman who went away, didn't play college football for a long time, played at Simon Fraser up in Canada, got drafted in the CFL in the first round as a 4th pick, ended up bouncing around after his first year to a few different practice squads, landed on a team, you know, as a short center with short arms. You know, it's kind of the curse of linemen. You know, no GM really wants somebody that size. He knew he had no choice but to put in the work. He had to eat like a monster just to keep that weight on his frame as an undersized lineman. And basically he had a coach come into his life that cared a lot about him, who believed in him and said, hey, you're already here. You have to do what you need to do. Don't compare yourself to others. You got to put in the work. And if you put in the work day in and day out, the results will show. And he had a really great career in the CFO, won 2 Grey Cups, multiple awards, and went against all the odds. No one really thought that he was really going to last more than a few years, even himself early on in his career.
Yeah, good story. Great story. And more of those to come on Man on Fire for sure.
Yeah.
So Teek, thanks again for joining us today. And I want to thank all the listeners for tuning in to LTADchat. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks for having me.